therapists in LATAM are in the informal economy, which means they're not, they work sort of in the informal side of things. And most of them, about approx a month, a therapist in LATAM makes around between $300 to $350 a month. Obviously, you can't compare it to the US because also the standard of living, the cost of living is lower, but it's still, plus they make very little money in general. I mean, not everyone, of course, it's not general. It's like, a large chunk of them make that amount. And then what happens in LATAM also, not in Brazil, because Brazil has a bit stronger labor laws, but in the rest of LATAM, they don't do, as in the US, double shifts or triple shifts. In LATAM, in a lot of, spas and in the spa industry, which is, I think about it and I'm like, it's so hard to understand that in an industry that focuses on wellness, that they don't focus on wellness for their employees. For me, it's like, hard to grasp. But their reality is that they do single shifts. And what that means is that for a lot of women in LATAM, they work 6 days a week because it's a lot of places it's a 6-day work week. So that means they have 1 day off, and those 6 days, they usually have to come into work around 8 to be able to start at 9. And they leave, 8, 9 at night. And for a lot of people, they don't live close to where they work. So it also, add on public transportation piece to that. So it basically what it comes down to is that for these women, 6 days out of 7, they have no contact with their children. Or with anything else, but for me, my burn is sort of the children, so it sort of has such a direct, obviously super hard life for the women, but it also has a huge impact on their kids, because it means they are growing up without their mom being present, and a lot of times they're taken care of, by other family members or by the gram. I mean, I'm not saying that, that other family, which can be great also in LATAM, the family structure is one of the things I love the most in LATAM is this, family is a very large concept. And, that's a very beautiful part of society here. But it's still your mom, or your dad, just that most of I would say with us, about 92% of our team are women. So I always talk women because it's more women therapists in general. It's more of a female profession than men, but I also include them. But so they come from these very difficult situations. So when we started SCAPE, for me, it's the vehicle that can change, and it's already changing, in relative scales, but already changing a lot of therapist women's lives. Because once they start, they usually make about 5 to 6 times what they were making before. So their income level increases a lot. They have flexible work hours, so they can, sort of this new economy, where people can sort of steer their own time, which in terms for me and the impact that I want to reach, which is the impact on their kids, also has a huge impact, because then they can steer their working hours and still have a lot of time to spend with their families. And then we give them tools like the financing tools so that they can actually start a job. And they don't work, some of them work full time with us, some of them work just hours. And for example, we had this woman some months ago. She started with us in another, not Mexico City, in a city that is like an hour and a half from Mexico City. And she was working in a spa there, and she had this baby, like a 6-month-old baby that was living with her mom in Mexico City. Oh. So she saw her baby once every 2 weeks, one day, because she just had like 1 day off, one Sunday every 2 weeks. So she would, in a month, the mom would see her baby 2 days a month. Oh. And she contacted someone in our office and like, what are my chances, to move city? And we were like, no, of course, move tomorrow. So she came, started to work here. Now she lives with her baby, such a, how also this flexible movement of like being able to come, I think it's like I always think of these other companies like Uber and these sort of new economy companies that gives you that possibility that you can start your job in, one city, but if you move tomorrow to another, you can like start tomorrow, and it gives you this flexibility that I think adds so much value, especially here, where opportunities are more limited. So it has this, I always tell this story because for me, I'll try not to cry because all these stories makes me always very emotional. But we had, this Christmas we couldn't do in person. There is this Christmas tradition in Mexico called posada, which is like the Christmas party, basically. Everyone does posada, and we had our posada, but on Zoom because it was still sort of, the pandemic sort of was still in Mexico City, wasn't really accepted to do an in-person meeting yet last Christmas. And so we had, this Zoom meeting with all these millions of therapists on, and we were like, trying to have some sort of conversation online. And we opened sort of the floor for people to speak. And so, and then, we heard this voice of this little kid like, hi, can I also say something? And he stuck his head up, 7-year-old little boy. And he's like, I just want to say thank you, to SCAPE, because since my mom started working at SCAPE, I now see her, and I was like, this is exactly the mission, So, I think that's it. Yeah, those stories at the end, we want much more of those stories. So yeah, I think that is, my sort of drive. And I think a lot of the companies' drive is exactly that.